All right, let's get going. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today's webinar. My name is Nick Rago. I'm VP of Product Strategy here for Salt Security. A little bit of housekeeping in the platform here. And when you're in the webinar viewing it, you're going to see chat. I believe it's in the right-hand part of your screen. Feel free to use that. We'll be monitoring the chat as we go through the webinar, answering questions. I'd like this to be a bit dynamic if possible as we go through this. So would love to hear from all of you and get your feedback and insights as we go through this presentation today. Short and sweet today, about 30 minutes we're going to do here. I just want to quickly set up the conversation for today and get right into a demonstration and show you what Salt Code is. So that really is the agenda today. We're going to be talking about coding agents, the predominance of coding agents now in the enterprise. We'll talk a bit about Salt Code. We'll go through a demo. And then there's a special offer for anybody that's attending the webinar. That's free access to Salt Code. We'll talk about that at the end of the presentation here. This is really preaching to the choir a little bit here. Everybody knows that AI is expanding the enterprise attack surface faster than we've ever seen before, faster than the mobile transformation phases that we went through, faster than all the digital transformation phases that we went through. I tell a lot of organizations that I work with that you think you're deploying AI, which you are, and leveraging AI in your enterprise, but what you're building right now is thousands and thousands of new machine-to-machine connections, and many of which you hope are governed and secure, but the fact of the matter is we're moving so fast right now and so quickly that there is a lot of balls being dropped. And we're going to talk about from a code standpoint and design and architecture standpoint, the risk that coding agents are now introducing into our environments and a bit about what we can do about it. We'll start here to really set this all up. And shift left has been this utopian application security dream. And that dream has always been, how do we get our security standards as far left as we can and on the developer desktop or as close to the developer desktop as we can in a really frictionless and non-abrasive manner. Well, we tried doing that. We tried doing it through a few different mechanisms. We tried education. We tried holding seminars with our developers. But short of any Jedi mind tricks and telepathy and putting, our security standards in developers and architects' heads, we all know that is very, very difficult, especially when we lived in a world in the past where developers, at least I'm an engineer by trade, and I know going through some of the digital transformation projects that I had worked on previously, a lot of the engineers were really compensated on how fast they were building microservices and pushing code out. So security was always, not top of mind in those paradigms. So what did we do from an application security standpoint? We started to say, okay, you know what? We're going to build a pipeline. We're going to jam as much as we can into the pipeline because from an application security standpoint, we control it. And then what was the result of that? So this is sort of the current state of the world right now. And it's no surprise right now we have this a little bit of abrasiveness and friction, traditionally now between developers and application security because there's a lot of noise in the pipeline right now. There is a lot of feedback. There's SaaS, there's DAS, there's SCA, there's linting tools, and we're trying. We've tried desperately from an application security and a cybersecurity standpoint to put as much security control as we can on the left-hand side or the beginning of the SDLC because we all know it's so costly to fix these problems once they have found their way into production. Now, that is the current state of the world, or the state of the world before coding agents. Now we have a new problem. It was bad before, but now AI coding velocity is making the problem much, much, much worse. And if AI is now generating or first drafting or greenfielding code in the large enterprise, waiting for runtime means it's already too late. And we need to make sure right now that we're not creating the next generation of security problems at machine speed. So the old way won't scale. And right now, if we kept it the way it is, or it has been, application security is going to be impossible. It is impossible. There's just too much coming down the pipe. And we're going to be seeing a lot of unwanted configurations and code finding its way into our staging and production environments. So one of the things that we have to look at here is that while AI is causing us a little bit of a headache right now, it's also providing us with a little bit of an opportunity because AI has a presence really throughout the whole SDLC now. And I'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation and demonstration here. And now we have an opportunity to leverage this to really change the paradigm here and extend security control and governance out of the pipeline and into the AI context window, into where coding agents are actually running and generating code and reviewing code. So with that, I'll introduce you to Salt Code. That is really the premise of Salt Code. We built Salt Code to help organizations enforce their agentic security policies inside every AI coding agent, whether that coding agent be on a developer's desktop integrated with their IDE, or whether that coding agent be leveraged and called, via CLI inside of the CI/CD pipeline, through the SDLC somewhere. And a few things that we wanted to do with this is, one is we wanted to support all the major coding agents that are out there. And what we wanted to provide the coding agents is we wanted to provide them with the ability to leverage industry best practices, be mindful of regulatory requirements from anything that's being, code that's being generated, or even infrastructure as code that's being configured. Think of things like AI gateways or API gateways that are all configured via code today. And last but not least, the ability to actually assess and enforce corporate security policies. We have every large enterprise that I work with today, they'll have governance committees and they will meet and they will say, here are our security standards. These are our 10 commandments of developers and architects. Thou shalt not do this and do that. And previously those documents were being written, they were being trained to architecture groups, platform teams, engineering groups, and then we kind of hope for the best and really put as much as we can inside the pipelines to see if they're being enforced. What we want to do is get to the point where, and again, I'll show you this live in a demo in a second here, but we want to get to the point where developers have the ability to say, hey, you know what, Cursor, I'm inside Cursor, generate me a new registration tool for my MCP. And Cursor automatically know when it's greenfielding, building code for the first time or configurations for the first time, what all your corporate security standards are, what your policies are, and will build code so that it's compliant with it right out of the gate. Now, that is the opportunity that's in front of us right now. And that's the reason why we had built Salt Code. So now we have this great opportunity where we can build compliant AI-generated code by default out of the gate. We have less dependency on the pipeline itself, all of the SAST and DAST tools in the pipeline. And when I say less dependency, I'm saying we have the opportunity to find more problems or fix more problems on the developer desktop. But as code gets through and configurations do get pushed through the pipeline, what we should see is better fidelity or higher fidelity with those technology investments that you already put into the pipeline, like SAST and DAST and any other scanners that you have. Right, a lot of the low-hanging fruit and a lot of that noise that was coming back to developers, you would hope at this point, if you implemented technology like this, it would solve that problem. One of the other major problems that we wanted to solve with Salt Code was the problem of the silo. Previously, what we would see in large enterprises is, let's say you have your security standards, and let's say there's a security standard that says user IDs have to be in UUID format. That is a security standard that we want everybody to abide by. Well, we have tools in runtime to make sure that those security standards are, to assess whether or not those security standards are being followed. And if they're not, now we're going to lob everything, back over, run through workflow to remediate that, fix that. Again, it was in production, so now it's very costly. We have testing tools that we put in the pipeline. Again, now we're manually putting that configuration or that standardization test in there for user IDs have to be in UUID format. Again, so that is a different place that policy has to be written and exist. And then we're going to the developers on their desktops themselves, and we're trying to do as much as we can with integrated with SAST or linting tools, or from an education standpoint, making sure that the developers know out of the gate that user IDs have to be in UUID format. One of the problems that we wanted to solve with Salt Code was having the ability to break down those silos and say it's one policy engine that feeds everything across the SDLC. One policy engine that is informing your coding agents on the developer desktop. That user ID has to be in UUID format. That is informing every other tool that has AI capability inside your pipeline, pulling from the same policy engine to know, again, that user ID has to be in UUID format, and have the ability to use that same policy engine to assess in runtime to make sure and confirm that that policy, user IDs have to be in the ID format, is being followed in production. So that is a major, major change and difference than what we're seeing and what we've been accustomed to running in the enterprise and large enterprise today. So we'll talk a little bit more and dive into Salt Code now and get you to the demo here. One of the things that we wanted to do, another thing we wanted to do with Salt Code was to make sure that it supports all of the major coding agents that are out there. So whether or not your developers in your organization is standardized on Claude Code, or whether you're using Cursor in the Cursor coding LLM, whether you're using VS Code or JetBrains or Kiro or Antigravity as your developer IDEs, all of those are supported. If you're using any of the coding agents inside your pipelines and being invoked via CLI, all the major ones are supported, Gemini Copilot. Generally, the common denominator here in how we implemented Salt Code, it's an MCP-driven technology. So any coding agent or coding remediation technology that's leveraging AI, as long as it supports an MCP configuration, it will be compatible, and it is compatible with Salt Code. And the reason why we chose this architecture was because it is really low effort for a high amount of value. Again, and it gives you a vast array of support, because what we're seeing now in a lot of the enterprises that we're working in, it's not just one IDE that's being used. It's not just one coding agent that's being used. So again, MCP compatible coding agent. A Salt Code is a remote MCP, so you configure that MCP client in the coding agent to point to the MCP server. We'll talk more about that, how that configuration is done in a couple of minutes. And then again, the back end of this is the Salt policy engine inside the Salt security, agentic security platform. The Salt Code supports two different integration types, authentication authorization types. One is more user-oriented, so it supports a OAuth workflow for users on their desktop inside an IDE, and also supports token integration for all your service count and CLI type of integrations inside the pipeline. From a guidance perspective, it will provide really, it's a two dimensions of guidance. First is what we call secure coding packs. There's about 40 different guidelines or coding guardrails and policies that come out of Salt Code. One around the OWASP API top 10, another around MCP security, top 10 best security practices, another around the OWASP LLM security top 10, and then one more that is sort of generic open API Swagger compliance. We put documentation support in there because all the agentic interfaces that we're seeing created today, whether they be backend microservices, serverless functions, MCP tools, best practice is always still to blueprint everything before you build it. And OAS Swagger is still the technology of choice that people are leveraging to do that today. So that's sort of the first dimension of it. The second dimension is around your corporate security policies. So again, the ability to, if I kind of take the policy that I've belabored already today, that user ID has to be in UUID format, that corporate security policy, that can be leveraged inside, that can be leveraged and pushed down to the coding agents as well as 100 plus other best practices, regulatory requirements that the Salt posture governance engine has in it by default. So again, this is a policy engine that is filled with all those best practices, regulatory requirements, but also houses all of your corporate security policies as well. So those security policies that were sort of written now have the ability to be leveraged inside this policy engine and assessed and enforced everywhere. Okay. For gauging impact, so it's one thing to push everything down and configure the coding agents and make sure that they have the guardrails in place to know what good code and what good architectures or configurations look like. It's another thing to actually see the value from an application security standpoint. So what we did with Salt Code as well is we've provided a window into usage. So what is the impact that these policies are actually having on the coding agents that are inside your environment? So with Salt Code, there is an administration interface that admins in Salt Code can log into. They can actually see how many active users are running, the number of policy checks with coding agents and what they're actually doing, or how often they're actually checking policies. And then also guidance around what the coding agents are actually doing. What are the policies that are being pulled the most? You may be surprised to know that, hey, I was surprised to know that we have this much MCP development that's going on, that coding agents are actually having to interact with those policies. more than anything else. So this will give you some good guidance as to who are the users using the coding agents, how often the coding agents are being used, and again, the guidance that those coding agents are actually getting. As I mentioned before, coding packs come out of the box, as well as setup guides for all of the major IDEs and CLI coding agent integrations that are out on the market today. So with that, I'm going to move over to a demonstration, and then I'll start to answer any questions. I already see a bunch that are popping in here as well. And like I said, I promised you this would be short and sweet today in a half hour, and then I'll kind of take you through the end of this and share with you the offer for those that are on the webinar today. So let me go ahead and just flip my screen over here. Okay, so we're going to start the demonstration here, and what you're looking at on the screen here, I'm sorry if this is a bit of an eye test, this is Cursor. So I'm inside Cursor. I have a GitHub repo pulled up here that I've brought down that is something that I've created called, Simple Express API, a bunch of user functions that we've created here for an application that we're building. It's written in Node.js. Inside Cursor, I have the Salt MCP configuration already done. The interesting thing with Cursor is that it supports hot configuration, meaning you can actually click a button, it'll auto-configure Cursor for you. Developers can come in here and manually do the configuration, set up an MCP here. Cursor Enterprise Edition, if your organization uses that, you can also configure MCP servers from an administration console there as well. And it takes the burden off of a developer, for example, of configuring it here. Now, a couple things that you're going to see once this is configured inside Cursor. First is you're going to see that a couple tools are showing up, as well as a prompt here. So list policies, get policies, these are both tools that the MCP client or the coding agent knows what to do with. But also we're providing prompt guidance as well. And what this basically gives the coding agent is a repeatable structure on when to leverage these tools or what to do with these tools and how to assess code against it. So what we wanted to do is to really make sure that the coding agents not just have the policies, but have a mechanism for using the policies in a repeatable fashion here. Okay, so what we'll do first here, we'll go back to the repository here, is let's do an education example. So what I'm going to do here is I'm saying, hey, what security policies are enabled? Just simple question. And what you're seeing Cursor do right now is it's actually checking against the Salt MCP server for enabled policies. And what you will see here in a second is all of the policies showed up based on severity. Give this a second to run. And here they are here. So the policies are now listed here. And again, this is a great example just showing you from a developer standpoint or an architect standpoint, the ability to understand, okay, what are the security policies that are important? There's 40 policies that are enabled in our organization right now, and they're ranging, as I mentioned before, everything from the OWASP API security top 10, MCP top 10, the documentation, OAS, and best practices in LLM security top 10. So all of that is there as well. Now, the other interesting thing here is that this is also helpful. I'm talking a lot about engineers and architects. One of the other things that, like it or not, that is existing in our organizations or in the enterprise today is this notion of vibe coding. The business analyst, the product manager now has access to Claude Code, now has access to Cursor. Also very impactful for them because it gives them a window into all of the security policies as well. Again, I've showed you an education example here, but now let's do something a bit different. Let's actually ask Cursor, hey, can you design me a new register admin API in Swagger that takes authentication via a query string? So I have gone ahead, typed that in. Cursor is looking at it. It is now looking at the security policies. And then first thing, I'll actually let this run here for a second. Okay, great. And now what Cursor is saying is, listen, what you just asked me to do, I can't safely design you an API that authenticates via query string. That pattern conflicts with with your own corporate security policies. Okay. Instead, let me show you a way that is compliant. So I'll kind of scroll down here, and this is a blueprint of an API or microservice. And even down in the bottom here, it basically says, hey, give me a little bit more information, and I'll adapt this design so that it matches all of your the specification matches all of your security standards out of the gate. So pretty impactful. We had a scenario here where a developer was going to build something, but right out of the gate, Cursor knew that what they were building or what they were attempting to build was going to be out of compliance. Now I'm moving over here on my desktop to VS Code. Same repository as I was working inside Cursor before, this Express API. Inside VS Code, I do have the MCP configured as well. So you can see the MCP configuration here. I'll actually show you what the JSON configuration looks like right here as well. Same configuration as before. Developer can come in here. They can configure the MCP themselves. You can provide your users, again, with a hot link. They click, auto-configures VS Code for them. It'll walk the user. In this case, I'm using a personal access token, but if you wanted to use OAuth, it'll walk the user through an OAuth authorization leg. And as well, I'm showing you VS Code, but if you're using Visual Studio Enterprise, configuration looks similar. And you have some capabilities to actually auto-configure the MCPs as well. In this particular demo, again, we're using VS Code, the default coding agent with Copilot, but whether it be like you see on the screen here in the upper right, Claude Code or Codex, integrated with VS Code, all supported as well. Now, for this part of it, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm actually going to ask the coding agent here, hey, I'm going to do a retroactive look back at this code, and I want to know, do any routes inside this repo, do they violate any of the critical security policies that are inside SALT or that our organization cares about? So we can see here, this is GitHub Copilot coming back saying, hey, I have the controls now. I have found and confirmed concrete critical policy gaps in the route layer. And then from here, what it is doing is actually showing us exactly what the non-compliance looks like in the existing code. Okay, so the first one was showing an example of a broken auth example. Now I'm actually showing an example of a BOLA, and down below here, an API 5 broken function level authorization example here. From inside here, a couple things can happen. One is I actually can click on the source code itself to actually see where the non-compliance is. In the case of the BOLA here, what the Copilot was actually calling out was that, listen, you have a directive that there needs to be some ownership and tenant in everything that you're doing. And in this particular service, we have a lookup, update, delete feature that isn't checking for ownership or tenant. It is actually, you provide it with an ID and it automatically would delete that user. So again, it has the ability to take your best practices and policies and then apply it to the code that it is observing. Now, the other interesting thing that's worth mentioning here is I'm showing you this quick demonstration inside of an IDE. The same validation can be done from a CLI standpoint. So let's say that you're leveraging, I'm going to stop my share here. Let's say that you're leveraging GitHub Copilot coding agent and you're doing it via GitHub as code gets checked in or a PR happens. You can leverage those coding agents. It could be Claude Code, whatever, Codex, whatever is in the pipeline. You could be leveraging those coding agents would also be able to leverage these same policies to validate at that level inside the pipeline whether or not the policies are being followed as well. I'll go ahead and share my screen while I keep talking here as well. One other thing I'll just quickly mention as well is that from a developer standpoint, always tell folks in application security when you're working with your platform teams, your engineering teams, that there's benefit in this for them. And their experience with security and application security, that would be a hard sell in the past. They're used to, at least I was, check in code, get a lot of feedback, ignore most of the feedback, complain about the feedback. The interesting thing with SALT code and this type of security approach, integrating with the coding agents that they rely on, is you have the ability to go back to the developers and engineering teams and platform teams to say, what if I could save you 40, 50, 60% of feedback from the pipeline? And I mean, that's conservative and a conservative estimate. I don't know a developer that would not put their hands up and say, yes, absolutely, I want this. This is something that would make them more effective and give them the opportunity to build code and have a greater chance than not of actually not seeing that code either ever again or in the next 20 minutes or hour or day or week. So from a developer and engineering perspective, it is a very, very powerful feature if positioned in that way. I have not met a developer who does not want less feedback coming from the CI/CD or the SDLC pipe. So what makes Salt Code different? A few different things. If you kind of take a look at what the Salt Security, agentic security platform offers, we're really giving organizations the ability to understand what they have and govern what they have and protect what they have from the moment a design is made, code is generated, all the way through production runtime. One of the big value areas or value tenets of our platform is the ability to discover. So Salt also has the ability to get inside your source code repositories, get inside your cloud configurations, and tell you exactly what you have. Where is, do I have rogue source code, rogue MCP servers that have been stood up or being configured at this time after the fact? So there's discoverability that is important here. Now, I've already showed you at code generation time, you now have the ability to enforce your policies there and create those the developer guardrails. And we've talked about how to really govern in the pipeline using coding agents that have been invoked by CLI, integrated with Salt Code. Then we talked about earlier before, the ability to take those same policies and validate them at runtime to make sure that all of your corporate security standards and policies are being followed. And then if they are not, if you find something in production, give you workflow to basically have the power to say, I found a place where that user ID is not in UUID format. Let me show you exactly where it is. And I'm now going to create workflow and put this back into the pipeline and give it to a coding agent and say, here is all the context around where we found it. It's running behind this AI gateway. It's running in this Kubernetes cluster. Here are the different ways you can fix it. And then the coding agent have the power then to do that. And then you wake up the next morning and a PR is waiting for you with the appropriate fix. Okay, I'm going to keep this on the screen for a second as I go ahead and just kind of answer a couple questions that popped up on the screen here. A couple things. Feel free to scan the QR code that's on the screen here, or just go to salt.security/salt-code. And any organization, it's actually, we're getting down to the last few organizations, but we opened this up to the first 100 organizations who want to try it. So the invite is still open and out there. Like I said, we're getting to the last of it right now. Salt Code is in sort of this early access phase right now. We're expecting GA in a few weeks with it. So this will give you quick early access and the ability to actually give feedback. So we'd love to hear from you. But go to this website. You can request an access token for Salt Code. We will go ahead and send you one, and then you'll see a configuration page. A link to a configuration page with all the major coding agents on it that will guide you in sort of how to configure it and test it and go on from there. Okay, so a couple questions have popped up here in the chat. One of the questions was, what languages does Salt Code support? So one of the things that we wanted to do with the platform was to make it really code agnostic. So again, because we're giving development guidelines to the coding agents themselves and the policies to the coding agents, it really doesn't matter. It matters more on what they're developing, not the how, if that makes sense in terms of the coding language. So for example, the purview of Salt Security, the agentic security platform, is anything that's in the agentic security ecosystem, whether it be triggers for agents, whether there be services that are making LLM, that are prompting LLMs, whether it be MCPs and MCP tools or agent orchestration tools that are being created, whether it be APIs or microservices or serverless functions that support agentic functions and agent capabilities. All of that is in the purview of Salt. And so that is really the guidance that we're providing the coding agent. So it doesn't matter if it's Node.js or if it's Perl or PHP, I'm dating myself, all of those would be supported. I'll take a look at other questions. Sheldon had one. Does Salt Code integrate into major SIM platforms for activity logging? So great question. A couple things. Any findings we have for non-compliance, let's say I'll start on the runtime side and going backwards, whether they be a finding that is there's a threat actor who's doing bad things or malicious things against your infrastructure, or whether it be a posture non-compliance, like we talked about, a policy non-compliance, all of that can be fed into workflows, whether they be into things like ServiceNow or Jira, or into all of the major SIMs that are out there, whether it be CrowdStrike, ngSIM, or Splunk, for example. All of that is supported. So again, you can push all of that. The one thing that Salt Code is doing today and right now is it's providing, using the term guardrails loosely here, but it's providing policies and coding guidance to the coding agents so that there is no non-compliance, right? So the idea here is we will see on the SALT side how often a coding agent has interacted trying to get the policies and guidance from SALT so that it doesn't make any mistake. Now, that said, you could compound SALT code findings and provide prompts with it to basically say, hey, if you see something that is in the CI/CD pipeline that is non-compliant, if we're doing a code review scan that SALT code has helped find, let's force that into a SIM. Or let's log it. So there's a lot of opportunity there to really kind of mold this into sort of the workflow managers that you want. We are looking to do more on sort of the non-compliance pieces there, even code synopsis in terms of what the developers are building inside the platform. But this is sort of the current state of what it offers today. Let's see if there is anything else here. So actually, I'm just saw that I'm over time. And I broke my promise of doing this within under 30 minutes. So for those that ask questions that I didn't have time to get to today, feel free to reach out. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can also go to the SALT Code website and request to talk to any account manager or your local account managers through there to help her answer any questions. But yeah, I thank you all for joining today, and I hope this was helpful for you.